Take a look at this picture. At first glance, it shows two sisters who seem ordinary, even gentle. But behind this image lies one of France's most shocking cases. What Christine and Leah Pépin did stunned the entire country, and even led to changes in the law. Christine was born in 1905, and Leah in 1911. Their childhood was filled with neglect and cruelty. Their father, Gustave, was away most of the time, and when he was home, he was harsh. Neighbors remembered constant fighting and shouting in the house. Their mother, Clemence, was even more unkind. She locked the girls in dark rooms, punished them harshly, and told them they were worthless. From a young age, Christine took care of Leah. She would sneak her food and comfort her during their parents' violent arguments. This created a powerful bond. Christine became protector, and Leah depended on her completely. When Christine was 15 and Leah was 9, their parent abandoned them and sent them to a strict Catholic school. The nuns enforced harsh discipline, making them scrub floors until their hands hurt and punishing them for the smallest mistakes. They also tried to separate the sisters, but Christine resisted fiercely. Eventually, the nuns allowed them to stay together, though they called their attachment unnatural. At 18, Christine left school to work as a maid. Her goal was to save enough money to bring Leah out of the school. For 3 years, Christine worked in wealthy homes, living in tiny rooms, eating leftovers, and enduring constant scolding. By 1926, she had saved enough to reunite with Leah, who was then 15. By that time, Christine had grown colder and mistrustful of others, while Leah had become entirely dependent on her sister. The two soon found jobs together in the Lancelin household in Le Mans. For 6 years, they lived in the family's mansion, working from early morning until late at night. Their room was a small attic space barely large enough for one bed. The family rarely treated them with respect. They were called only girl or you, never by their names. Any small mistake brought scolding, and Madame Lancelin often compared one sister against the other to create tension. Christine and Leah withdrew further into themselves. They whispered each other, used secret signals, and moved through the house in unison. Neighbors later remarked that they seemed inseparable, sharing not only clothes and belongings but also thoughts and feelings. By the late 1920s, Christine had spent almost 10 years as a servant, and Leah had known no other life. They felt trapped, with no future beyond endless work. Their emotions began to build quietly, and the warning signs were clear. By early 1933, the sisters were fully isolated. They avoided church, never took days off, and rarely spoke to anyone outside their home. Shopkeepers noticed how they always stood close together, whispering only to each other. A local doctor later recalled Christine visiting him for headaches, sleeplessness, and troubling thoughts she could not escape. In 1933, mental health was barely recognized. Feelings like sadness or stress were often dismissed as weakness instead of being seen as something serious. 2 weeks before everything changed, Christine gave a hint of what was coming. She asked a neighboring servant, Marie, "What would you do if your employers treated you like nothing?" Marie laughed and replied, "That's just our life." Christine's quiet response unsettled her. Not for much longer. Then came the day that altered everything. February 2nd, 1933. It was a Thursday that started like any other. Christine woke before dawn, gently shaking Leah to get up. They dressed silently in their cramped attic, sharing the small mirror as always. By morning, Christine was ironing clothes while Leah cleaned and helped with food. The house felt unusually quiet. Monsieur Lancelin had gone out early, and Madame Lancelin with her daughter Genevieve were planning a trip later. But Leah noticed something was different. Christine seemed tense and distant, her mind elsewhere. That afternoon, Christine worked on one of Genevieve's delicate dresses. The iron, old and faulty for weeks, sparked and suddenly broke down, leaving a scorch mark across the fabric and cutting power to part of the house. For most, this would have been an accident. But Christine knew exactly what would follow. Harsh words, blame, maybe even punishment. Years of experience told her this moment would not end kindly. When Madame Lancelin and Genevieve returned around 4 p.m., their anger was immediate. They scolded Christine in front of Leah, called her careless, and threatened to deduct the cost from their already tiny wages. Then Genevieve added words that pierced deeper. Two grown women who can't even manage a simple iron. Perhaps we should hire real servants. The thought of losing their jobs and being separated hit both sisters hard. Christine's years of frustration began to surface. 6 years of bowing her head, apologizing for things that weren't her fault, swallowing her dignity. Leah saw the change in her sister's face and knew something irreversible was about to happen. Suddenly, Christine snapped. One moment she stood silent under the scolding. The next she lunged at Genevieve with explosive fury. Madame Lancelin screamed and rushed to protect her daughter, but Leah stepped in to block her. The sisters moved together as if rehearsed, their actions sharp and in sync. Christine went for Genevieve, while Leah held off Madame. What made the attack so disturbing was its intensity. It wasn't about money or escape. It was years of anger bursting out at once. They grabbed whatever was at hand, from heavy objects to kitchen tools, even their bare hands. Investigators later said the scene looked less like a crime and more like a storm tearing through the house. Some experts later suggested it was the sisters' way of striking back against years of control and humiliation. The struggle lasted less than 30 minutes. When it ended, silence filled the house. The hallway showed the aftermath of a fierce confrontation, a scene that shocked even the most experienced officers. What came next was perhaps even more unsettling. The sisters calmly cleaned themselves, changed into fresh clothes, straightened their small attic room, and then lay down together on their bed, side by side. That evening, the sisters didn't try to run. There was no panic, no attempt to hide. They simply lay calmly in their bed as if nothing unusual had happened. When later asked why they didn't flee, Christine's answer was brief. Where would we go? We had nowhere. Years of being told they were worthless had left them believing it. Around 6 p.m., Monsieur Lancelin came home. The house was dark and unusually quiet. He called for his wife and daughter, but no one replied. Strangely, the door was locked from the inside, something that never happened when the family was home. Alarmed, he fetched his neighbor, Monsieur Roussel. Together, they climbed a ladder to a window. What they saw inside horrified them. Police were called, and even experienced officers were shaken by the scene. Detective Henri Bousquet later wrote that it was unlike anything he had ever encountered. At first, the sisters were found lying peacefully in their bed. Many assumed they were victims who had somehow survived. Only when officers noticed blood on Christine's hands did the truth become clear. When asked directly if they had killed Madame Lancelin and her daughter, Christine answered without hesitation. Yes, they were cruel to us, and that was it. She gave no long explanation, no dramatic speech, no sign of remorse. When pressed further, she only repeated, "They treated us badly, so we fought back." Leah spoke even less. When asked if she regretted what had happened, she seemed confused by the question. "Regret?" she whispered. "Why would we regret it?" Doctors who examined the sisters noted their strange detachment. They spoke of the events calmly, almost like describing routine chores, with no clear sense that anything wrong had been done. One psychiatrist observed that they seemed unable to understand why others were so shocked. 6 months later, the trial began and quickly became a national obsession. Newspapers called it the crime of the century. Reporters filled the courtroom, eager to see the two women behind the case. What shocked many was how ordinary the sisters looked. Wearing plain black dresses, hair neatly combed, sitting quietly side by side. They could have been anyone's daughters. The prosecutor struggled to convey the seriousness of the crime against women who appeared meek and unthreatening. These women, he declared, did something that forces us to question what human beings are capable of. But the defense painted another picture. Their lawyer described two young women scarred by years of abuse, neglect, and humiliation. They are not evil, he argued. They are damaged. Psychiatrists studied them in depth. Dr. Lyon Janier concluded that the sisters had built a private world of their own, where their bond excluded everything else. In their minds, what happened wasn't murder. It was survival, a way of fighting back against years of mistreatment. Christine herself gave the most unsettling testimony. When asked what happened, she spoke calmly. They told us we were worthless. We showed them we weren't. When the prosecutor pressed her about taking 2 lives, Christine frowned. Innocent? She asked. They were not innocent. They made us feel like nothing. After 3 days, the verdict was delivered. Christine, viewed as a leader, was sentenced to death. Leah, considered under her sister's influence, was given 10 years of hard labor. The courtroom erupted. Some cheered, others wept. But the most dramatic moment came from the sisters themselves. Realizing they would be separated, Christine shouted Leah's name again and again. Leah collapsed in tears and had to be carried from the courtroom. For the first time since their arrest, both showed raw emotion, desperately reaching for one another as guards pulled them apart. In prison, Christine's condition quickly declined. Separated from Leah for the first time, she refused food, convinced the guards wanted to poison her. She became frail, restless, and withdrawn. Most disturbing of all were her conversations with Leah, conversations that officers soon realized were entirely one-sided. In prison, Christine spoke constantly to the empty cell as if Leah were still with her. Guards often heard her whisper, "Don't worry, Leah. I'll protect you. I'll always protect you." She left food untouched for her sister, made space on her bed, and carried on one-sided conversations for hours. Doctors reported that Christine had created a private world where Leah was still by her side. The separation slowly destroyed her. Although her death sentence was later reduced to life in prison, it was too late. Christine's health declined rapidly, and on May 18, 1937, just 4 years after crime, she died in her cell. The official cause was exhaustion, but many believe she simply couldn't survive without Leah. Her final words, according to the prison chaplain, were, "Tell Leah I'm waiting for her." Leah served her full sentence and was released in 1943 at the age of 32. Alone for the first time in her life, she changed her name to Marie and worked quietly as a hotel maid in Nantes. For almost 60 years, she lived in silence, never marrying, never starting a family. Guests describe her as polite but distant. Neighbors noticed strange habits. She always kept 2 of everything in her home: 2 pillows, 2 nightgowns, 2 toothbrushes. She even set her table for 2, speaking softly as if Christine were still there. Leah lived to the age of 90, passing away in 2001. She was found in bed, resting peacefully with 2 pillows beside her. Even after decades, it seemed she had never let go of that attic room where her life with Christine began. The case of the Pépin sisters left a permanent mark on France. It raised difficult questions about class, power, and the treatment of servants. Over time, labor laws were reformed, and the mistreatment of domestic workers was finally challenged. But beyond the reforms, their story revealed something deeper about human nature. That under enough pressure, anyone can reach a breaking point. Writers and artists were fascinated by the case. Jean-Paul Sartre saw the sisters as symbols of the oppressed fighting back, and Jean Genet based his famous play The Maids on their story. Yet behind the art and philosophy, the tragedy remained clear. 2 young women broken by neglect, cruelty, and a system that left them invisible. It all circles back to that photograph taken in 1932, months before everything changed. Christine stands with her hand on Leah's shoulder, their faces calm but distant, standing just a little too close. The signs were there, the isolation, the dependence, the quiet resentment. But no one noticed. Afterward, everyone who knew them said the same thing. They seemed quiet, ordinary, harmless, and that is what makes their stories so haunting. Sometimes danger doesn't look dangerous. Sometimes it hides behind familiar faces. Nearly a century later, the case still raises questions. Are killers born, or are they shaped by the lives they endure? Could this tragedy have been avoided if someone had treated the sisters with care? And the most unsettling thought, how many others live today just one step away from their breaking point? That single photograph of Christine and Leah is more than just an image. It is a warning. Normality can be a mask, hiding storms beneath the surface. 2 sisters who looked so ordinary left behind one of the most chilling stories in history. Remember their faces. Remember their story. And remember, sometimes the most frightening people are the ones who look just like everyone else. The story of Christine and Leah Paypan is not just a crime from the past. It is a reflection of how ordinary lives can unravel when hardship, neglect, and injustice pile up without relief. What makes their case so haunting is not only the violence that shocked France in 1933, but also the quiet moments that came before and after. A single photograph taken in 1932 showed them standing side by side, looking calm, almost anonymous. Nothing in their expressions warned of the tragedy to come. Yet behind that still image were years of pain, isolation, and dependence that slowly pushed them toward the breaking point. Christine's decline in prison showed the depth of the sisters' bond. She could not survive without Leah, creating an imaginary world where her sister was always beside her. Her whispers to an empty cell, leaving food untouched for someone who wasn't there, revealed the fragility of her mind and heart. In the end, Christine's body gave up, but her last words made it clear that her thoughts never left Leah. For her, love and loyalty had become both a comfort and a prison of their own. Leah's later life was quieter, but no less tragic. Though she lived nearly 60 more years, she never escaped the shadow of her past. By changing her name and working quietly as a hotel maid, she sought a simple existence, far from the attention of the world. Yet her habits, keeping two of everything, speaking as if Christine were still present, show that she carried her sister with her until the very end. Even in old age, Leah remained tied to that bond, as if she had never truly left the attic where their lives fell apart. The legacy of their case forced France to confront how society treated domestic workers and the working class. The sisters' suffering was not just personal. It revealed systemic problems. Over time, labor reforms and better protections for workers came, but those changes could never erase the personal cost of what the sisters endured. Their story became the subject of plays, books, and films, not because of sensational details alone, but because it forced people to think about how pressure, cruelty, and invisibility can shape human behavior. Even now, nearly a century later, the case raises uncomfortable questions. Are people shaped more by their circumstances than by their nature? Could the tragedy have been avoided if someone had noticed their struggles earlier or treated them with compassion? How many people today live under similar pressure, silent and unseen, on the edge of collapse? The Paypan sisters remind us that danger does not always appear in obvious ways. Sometimes it hides behind faces that look calm, polite, or ordinary. That is what makes their story unforgettable. It is a warning that beneath the surface of normal life, unspoken pain can grow until it finally erupts. When we look back at their photograph, we see more than two young women in simple dresses. We see a bond that became unbreakable, a tragedy shaped by neglect, and a story that still whispers to us across time.